Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are starting our study in the book of James. Last week we did a little bit of introduction, and this morning we're actually going to get into the text. So, James, we talked about a little bit last week. James is an excellent collection of descriptions on how Christians should behave. How should a Christian act? What kind of things should Christians do? What is a mature Christian like? The first chapter, like I mentioned last week, that I think there are three themes in the book of James that he likes to cycle through. So testing, wisdom, and wealth. I think those are the three themes that James kind of likes to focus on. Whereas wisdom is kind of maybe a catch-all kind of category where he talks about how to live wisely, and that comes into a lot of different things. But he likes to center around the ideas of what do you do when you're in trials, what do you do when you're tested. He likes to talk about wealth whenever he talks about, well, wealth is temporary. He talks about generosity. Well, we should be treating others. We should be giving to people rather than just storing up wealth for ourselves. So I feel like these three themes are the way James is trying to work at this, and it's not a perfect outline. But these three themes kind of cycle through twice in the first chapter. And so we're going to go through, hopefully, the first 15 verses. If we don't get through all that, that's all right. All right, let's go ahead and say a prayer. Lord Almighty, we thank you, God, so much for the chance to worship with our brothers and sisters. We thank you, God, for the chance to open up your word and consider who you are. We ask, God, that you would help us to learn, that we may mature, that we may grow up to be perfect into the example of Christ. We ask, God, that as we read your word, that we would not just hear it, but that we would do it, that we would apply it to our lives, that we would consider the way we are supposed to live, consider how we are supposed to live according to your call. We thank you, God, so much for the sacrifice of Jesus that forgives us of our sins by our faith. We ask, God, that you would strengthen us in our faith and help us to seek you and to walk by faith and to pursue the things that are in according to your will. We love you, Lord. We ask, God, that we would be given glory by all the things that we think, say, and do. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
So James chapter 1, verse 1, right? James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, greetings. And we talked a little bit last week about who wrote the book of James. Who knows, right? It's one of the James, probably the brother of Jesus, maybe not. Moving on. Verse 2 to 4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its perfect effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So James, he kind of starts off with a heavy topic, right? He doesn't beat around the bush. He's just like, hey, let's talk about the hard parts of life, right? That's how you start a conversation, right? Starting off with the deep stuff. You know, he starts off talking about, well, when you meet trials of various kind, let's stop there for a second. What is a trial? If someone asked you to define what is a trial, what would you say?
Poverty.
Poverty is a trial. That's a very common trial, is it not? Yeah. Money. I mean, that's a huge trial. I remember reading about one statistic that said, I think it's a little bit dated, but why do most couples fight? And it's money, right? Money's always a huge problem. Whether you have too much of it or not enough, right? It's always a problem. Persecution. Yeah. And don't we face persecution today?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Even though
something's wrong.
Yeah, if we don't, something's wrong. That's what Walt said. That's true. And we may not be beaten in the streets or stoned, but we face it today, no doubt. Any other thoughts? What is a trial? Temptation? Yeah. Temptation and trials. James liked to focus a lot on that in the first chapter. When we talk about temptation and trial, we like to think trials are from the outside, temptations are from the inside. Really, James kind of does touch on the external and the internal, but when you're looking at just the Greek word, it's the same word, temptation and trial. Any other thought on what a trial is?
Health crisis.
What'd you say?
Health crisis.
A health crisis. Yeah, that's a trial, isn't it? Going through health problems. Yep, 100%. I heard something else?
I said politics.
Politics. Yep. I forget. There was a word in some language that, I like words that can't translate. I forget what the word is, but it's a word that translates to concern for the world. Anxiety because of the state of the world. And I feel that, when you're looking at the world, sometimes we watch too much news. You watch the news, they love making you feel anxious, and they're good at it, right? But you take a look at the world, and a little bit of a trial, ain't it? Yeah, Kevin?
It's what tests your patience or your integrity.
Want to say that again?
It's whatever tests your patience or integrity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would agree. See, trying to think. Trouble in family. Families come with a lot of trouble. Trouble at work. What else did I write? There are times whenever I have struggled in my faith, doubts can be a little bit of a trial. When you expect God to do something, He doesn't, or something happens and you wonder why God did it or allowed it, or, trying to stumble in your faith, trying to understand God's Word, but you're having trouble. I feel like that's been a trial I've faced many times in my life. Relationship troubles. Just about anything that can cause you to doubt, about anything that can just reduce the quality of your life, anything that just gets in your head and just rummages around in there and it won't just leave. You know what I mean? And so trials are just something that is as common in James' day as it is in our day, right? And when you read the book of James, you're going to think to yourself, wow, when was this book written? It feels like it was written for today, because James's topics are so relevant to today. You're going to think that it was basically written in 2023. And so James, he starts off with these trials. One of the biggest things that anyone ever faces, just an overall description of when life gets hard. And I think this passage is really good. He's talking about enduring trials. And one commentary I was reading pointed out the four words in this passage, and I like that. How do you handle trials? He has 4 words here that I think are really significant in trying to face a trial. Count, know, let, ask. He tells us to count trials as joy. What does that speak to? That speaks to a joyful attitude. He says, know that trials make you grow. It means you understand, you have an understanding mind. He says, let yourself grow. He says in verse 4, let steadfastness have its full effect. He's telling you to let it. And then he's a surrendered will. And he says, ask God to provide a believing heart. I like these because when we're talking about a trial, and James is giving these comments about what a trial is and how to get through it, it gives you a 4-step solution to when life gets hard, what do? He starts off, count it all joy, my brothers. What is joy? Is it possible to have joy when you're sad?
Yes.
Yeah? But, so is joy happiness? Are those the same thing?
No.
Because you can't be happy when you're sad, right? Happy when you're mad. Happiness is an emotion. Is joy an emotion?
Be content with life, no matter what it's delivering to you at the time, because we have something far greater to look forward to.
Well, it said to be content with life, knowing you have something far greater. God's Word says it multiple times, not just James, to consider trials joy, consider persecution joy, to have joy when life is hard. And I don't think joy is an emotion in any sense. When we think of joy, I don't think of having a big smile frolicking through a field of flowers. That's not what I think. Like Walt said, it's being content. It's a deep-seated, conscious resolve of hope, right? It's almost kind of like an optimistic view of life, kind of almost like this commentator, this author, he said, a joyful attitude. That it's a type of attitude. It's a glass half full kind of perspective, right? When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And I knew I had an uncle, he had a phrase that was kind of like when life gives you lemons, you make lemonades. It had a cuss word, so I'm going to clean it up. When life gives you manure, make fertilizer. And I always like that because, I mean, when life gives you lemons, well, I'll tell you, sometimes I wish I had lemons. Life was giving me worse than lemons. But whenever life gives you manure, you make fertilizer. When life gives you something so terrible, do something good with it, right? And so he says, count it as joy. I mean, what does it mean to consider something joy, right? He doesn't say just be joyous. He says, count it as joy. What does that mean? What does it mean to count something as something?
Close to allocation.
Allocation. You want to expand on that?
Well, allocation means I'm going to take this and make it for this purpose. You normally think of allocation and like budgets and funding.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this amount of money and buy a new car. So it's a purposeful devoting of something for that purpose.
Oh, that's great. Mike said to allocate it, to devote something to something else for a different purpose. Actually, this term is a financial term, to count. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's to kind of evaluate something and to choose to view it in a certain purpose. Like the Apostle Paul would use this idea in Philippians 3 whenever he's saying, yeah, look at my pedigree. I got this. And like, but I count it all as garbage. You know? He's like, I have all the pedigree, all the degrees. I have the best upbringing. I have the best race. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. I count it as garbage, right? So when you look at something and you evaluate it, right? And like I knew this one preacher, and he had a bookmark that his little daughter had made for him whenever she was like 4. And that bookmark, he treated it like it was pure gold, right? Was it worth anything? No. It was just cardboard. It was just construction paper. But he laminated it, right? To him, that was worth more than anything. So when you look at something, and you get something, when you look at trials, and you have difficulty in life, and life is just going bad, you look at it, and in your mind, what you see is joy. In the same way that a little bookmark given to you by a 4-year-old daughter is worth its weight in gold. You look at trials and say, it's joy, right? And the ultimate reason why we do that, he's going to expand on. Do we look at our trials in our lives and do we value them? Do we look at the hard times that we're going through? I think part of the reason why he's telling us to do this is because it's not natural for us to do it, right? When you go through hard times, the last thing you're going to want to think is, this is a good thing that it's happening, right? That's the last thing that you want to think. But that's what he's saying. He said, I want you to look on the bright side. I want you to look on glass half full. I want you to think on the spiritual side of things. And I want you to understand that when you're going through difficult times in your life, that it's going to work for something good. I don't think God's saying you need to have a smile on your face. I think he's saying you need to look at the spiritual side of things. Because trials in our lives, difficulty in your life, is a spiritual opportunity. Rob?
I mean, I guess it shows my age, but I remember way back when we had the thing for joy was Jesus, others, yourself. If you put yourself first, you're geared more towards happiness. What makes you yourself smile?
Yeah.
When you have Jesus as your base, helping others, and then yourself as dead last, that doesn't matter what happens around you because your base is always Jesus and helping others, that no matter what comes around, yourself is not the main goal.
I like that. He said, joy, you could use it as an acronym. Jesus, others, yourself. Joy. And when yourself is put at the end, you'll have joy whenever Jesus is at the beginning, and then others, and then yourself last. That's a really good thought. So he says, count it as joy. He says, no, trials make you grow. To understand this, that you have steadfastness. NIV says perseverance. New King James says patience. New American says endurance. What are these qualities? These qualities are, what is steadfastness? What is endurance? What is perseverance? Any thoughts? What do those speak to? Anyone can be. What'd you say?
Fruit of the Spirit.
Fruit of the Spirit. Yeah. Anyone can be faithful to God when their life is going well.
The long-term commitment.
Long-term commitment. I like that. It takes a mature Christian to be faithful to God whenever they've experienced tragedies and whenever they're going through trials. It's this quality that comes through living life. It's this quality that you know that no matter what life throws at you, you're going to cling to God. And sometimes you really don't have that quality until you've gone through hard times with God, right? Until you've gotten to the point where you've had to make the decision, my life is going terrible. Am I going to cling to God or not? And until you really have that moment, you really don't have this quality of endurance. I mean, he says, count it as joy. Why? Because trials produce growth. Does it make it easier to know that trials produce growth? Does it make it easier getting through the trial? I mean, isn't it better to know that something good can come out of our suffering? Isn't that good to know? Because, suffering is going to happen no matter what in life. Bad things are going to happen. Isn't it good to know that at the end of the day, no matter how difficult things are, something good is going to come out of it, even if that good is just you getting closer to the Lord? And isn't you getting closer to the Lord the best good? Right? And so you can look at a trial and say, I hate that I'm going through this. I hate that this is happening, but you know what? This is an opportunity for me to get closer to God, and for that reason, I'm going to glorify God, and I'm going to be happy, or I'm going to be joyous, right? To have that glass half full perspective, to think to yourself, when life gives me lemons, I'm going to make lemonade. When life gives me something bad, I'm going to look on the bright side. I'm going to do what I can. Isn't that a little bit easy? Doesn't that make trials a little bit easier? Not easy, but easier, right? James says, let yourself grow. I think it's unique. It says, this is one of those statements that I would kind of gloss over. Let steadfastness have its full effect. But why does he say let, right? He doesn't say steadfastness is going to grow so that you're perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. He says let it. Why does he use the word let? What does that word imply?
You have the option of quitting.
You have the option of quitting. You have a choice to make, don't you? It means you have to cooperate. That you could leave, or you could go forward. Can you grow in your faith by accident? No. You may not be striving to grow, but you may just be striving to serve the Lord. God cannot build our character without our cooperation. If we resist, He usually chastens us into submission. But if we submit to God, He accomplishes His work, right? He's not satisfied with a halfway job. He wants the full effect. He wants you to be perfect, complete, lacking in nothing. What's more valuable? I understand this decision is obvious, but sometimes it's a little hard. But what is more valuable? A life free from trouble or growing in your faith? Right? And so obviously the second, but doesn't that mean that when trials make us grow, they're worth the trouble they cause? It doesn't feel like it in the moment, but they are.
I think God has provided us everything we need to live a godly life. Do we choose to accept it in that way? Mm-hmm. We can make the decision, well, I don't like this. We fail to realize the value of our trials. Our trials are helping us to mature, to grow strong, to love when love is not easy.
Right.
And like I said, go on and on and on here, but
Right.
God has provided everything we need to live a godly life, and we get to make the choice.
Sure. Well, it said God has provided everything we need for a godly life, and we get to make the choice when to love whenever it's hard to love. I was reading one book, and this one gentleman and his wife, he went to go see this world-famous weaver at a loom, right? And they were working on these rugs, and he noticed that he was looking at the rugs, and he noticed they weren't very beautiful at all. I mean, these were master craftsmen making things, and he realized, and there's lots of strands of yards hanging, and the pattern isn't very nice. And he's kind of confused until he learns that that's the underside of the rug. And the craftsman said, don't judge a rug when you're looking on the wrong side. You know, and I think that's part of what we're talking about, is sometimes you're looking on the wrong side. When you're going through trials and you're looking at the physical external side, it looks bad. But when you're looking on the spiritual side, it's beautiful, right? And so that's what he's trying to talk about when he's talking about trials. Yeah, you can focus on the difficulty, or you can focus on the opportunity. You can focus on the fact that God is working in you to produce greater character, to make you closer to Christ, to make you closer to Him, to make you stronger in faith. And because of that, the trials that come are worth the trouble they cause. He moves on. Oh, Mike, go ahead.
An example is Jesus' crucifixion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that was ugly just about any way you look at it until you see it from the spiritual side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mike said Jesus' crucifixion is a great example of this. On the outside, looked absolutely terrible, but the spiritual benefits that came from it just abound. And so that's a great example. Thank you, Mike. And so one of the other things James says to get through a trial is ask. Let's read verses 5 to 8. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And so one of the challenges of the book of James is trying to figure out what the connection is with the verses, right? So verse 2, 3, and 4, he's talking about counting joy when you meet trials. Verse 3, he's talking about trials produce growth. Verse 4, allow yourself to grow, to become mature. And then verse 5, if you lack wisdom, ask God. And like I said, sometimes the trial with understanding James is trying to figure out how one connection connects to the next, right? You know, how is wisdom connected to trials? And you think, well, wisdom's pretty necessary when you're in a trial. When you're in a trial, you need wisdom to be able to consider it joy, right? Wisdom is important to be able to see that what is before you is not just a trial, but an opportunity to grow. We can't let a trial go to waste. If you're going to go through absolutely terrible things in life, you might as well use it as an opportunity to grow closer to God, right? And I remember talking to one gentleman, and we had just met. I was at a restaurant, a fast food place, and I was reading my Bible while I was eating. I was on a lunch break, and he noticed I had a Bible, and he wanted to ask me a couple questions and talk to me about life. And I was like, sure, go ahead. And he told me, you know, I used to be a lot more faithful to the Lord, but my life's gotten a little bit more difficult, and I'm almost homeless, and I guess I put God on the back burner. And I asked him, I said, how much sense does it make to put God on the back burner when you need Him the most? You know, we need wisdom to know that when trials hit your life, when your life gets difficult, that's when you need God the most, right? That's whenever you need to lean on God. When you're going through a difficult time, lean on God. That's what He wants you to do. He wants you to lean on Him whenever you're outside of a trial as well. Don't forget to do that. But that's an opportunity for you to get closer to God. And so James says, you want to get through trials, one of the things you have to do is you have to ask God. You got to understand. You got to surrender to Him. You got to believe that He's going to provide for you. He says, I want you to ask for wisdom. And He not only says what to ask, He says how to ask. Ask with faith. Our faith lies in God's character. Our faith does not lie in how hard we work, on our prayers, or our faith lies in the person we are praying to. That God is a good giver and He loves to give. And when we trust in Him, when we trust that God is a good giver, God will give to us. The mark of an immature Christian is one who is up and down, like the waves of the sea. He describes this person as a double-minded man. A person who focuses not on one thing, but on two different things. Where he is pulled in two different directions. He's trying to serve two different masters. And it produces instability in his life. So in the midst of trials, when you need that stability, when life is up and down, and you're going along with it, you need an anchor that holds you down. And that anchor is God. Trials are going to rock your life. It's going to rob you of all these feelings of security. But when your security is rooted in God, you're always secure. And that's why he's saying to ask God. When you're in those trials and you don't know how to move forward, you ask God for the wisdom to understand. The wisdom to see that this trial is an opportunity. The wisdom to see that you can grow. The wisdom to see that no matter how difficult life is, God is still there. And God is the kind of God that's going to give when you ask. And you can have faith in that. Any thoughts? Mike?
I think you said it.
Okay.
When you ask God for wisdom, don't hope you're going to get it. You're going to get it.
You're going to get it.
Or you're not asking in faith.
Right.
To ask in faith means that you are confident God is going to give you wisdom.
All right.
And it's with everything.
Right. Yeah, and it's confidence that God is good. That God said, I'm going to give it to you if you ask. And you can have faith in that. You can have faith in the character of God. Yeah, when you pray, be confident. Don't just say, well, I hope He gives it to me. No, you're going to get it. Mike?
Sometimes it scares me when people pray for patience. How do you get patience? You get loaded up with lots and lots and lots of problems. And you're trying to deal with it. So one of the outcomes of these trials, these issues that you're facing, is wisdom. You will begin to see what's really important, and you'll let go of the trivial.
Letting go of the trivial. That's a good thing to say. Absolutely. Verses 9 to 11. So he makes a transition here. Again, it's the question of how does this verse relate to the next verse? Why is he jumping from place to place, right? And you have to draw the connection. He's talking about trials. He's talking about asking for wisdom. He's saying, when you ask with faith. Because if you don't ask with faith, you're a double-minded man. You're unstable. You have all these doubts. You're being cast to and fro by the trials of life. He then talks about wealth. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation. Because like a flower of the grass he will pass away, for the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flower falls, and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. He makes another jump here. What's the connection here? What is the connection between trials, wisdom, and wealth? Now, there's not a specific answer, just any thoughts. I think one of the things we mentioned before, what's one example of a trial? You said poverty, right? One of the biggest trials in life is money, financial, right? And so maybe the connection here is he's talking about, part of some people are going to go through trials because they're poor. Maybe these poor people are thinking, well, life would be easier if only I was rich. Well, it's important that regardless of your financial status, trials are going to come. In fact, while the rich person may have an overall easier life, his spiritual temptations are going to be greater. With great wealth comes great temptation. Wealth is a blessing, but it's also a curse that constantly presents a threat to your relationship with God. I mean, not having enough money to pay the bills, that's a trial. I get that. I've been there. I understand. But having plenty of money, that's also a trial. But it's much more subtle, because you think that you're not in the midst of a trial, whereas you are tempted to depend on your money rather than on God. I mean, when you don't have that much money, guess what? You don't have many options. You got to depend on God, right? I mean, the only choice, I've been there. I've been in that situation where I was a college student. I was thinking to myself, how am I going to pay the bills this month? And the only choice I had was to pray and pray and pray and pray. And God always provided. But now I'm in a place where I have a good salary. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm happy to be able to pay the bills well. But maybe I'm not praying near as much as I used to, right? Back then I was praying all the time. Lord, give me this daily bread, right? Provide for me day to day to day to day. And now I'm not in a position where I don't have to do that, but I should. Right? You see what I'm saying? I understand. Yes, the rich person is going to have a higher quality of life. I understand. But the trials he faces are going to be much more subtle and thus much more dangerous. And especially considering that in this world, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, our quality of life is higher than it has ever been in the history of all the world. Compared to 400 years ago, we live like kings. The fact that this is an air-conditioned building, that is insane. Not even a pharaoh would have that. Not even Julius Caesar had an air-conditioned building, all right? It's important to understand that riches, wealth, money is a temptation. It is a temptation for you to not depend on God. And so here he's talking about, that lowly brother, the brother who doesn't have too much wealth. You need to understand, God's going to lift you up. God has a soft spot on his heart for all those who are poor. He has a soft spot on his heart for all those who are suffering and hurting, who have very little. And so he needs to be boasting in the fact that he can glorify God. He needs to rejoice in God. This rich man, though, he needs to humiliate himself. He needs to lower himself. He needs to have humility. He needs to lower himself in understanding that he is a sinner and that this wealth does nothing. That this wealth is only really a curse, spiritually speaking, right? There are some blessings that can come from wealth. I understand that. And so what you have is you have the low man and the high man, and they're coming onto the same plane, right, in the eyes of Christ. The poor are lifted up, and the rich are humbled. And so you have this equal plane for all people in the eyes of Christ, that even the rich man is a sinner who needs the Lord, and the poor man is a man that God will provide for. And so I think that's a beautiful thought.
Bobby, when do you really feel joy because of wealth? Is it when you use it for your own greed, or when you lift someone up out of the mire? And it's always when you help someone that you feel better about yourself and life itself.
Absolutely.
But if you use it to satisfy your greed, it's so temporary. It's not lasting.
Yeah.
It's there and gone.
Absolutely. Walt made a good point that when you use your wealth for others, you find a sense of fulfillment. But when you use it for yourself, you don't get that feeling. That's a great point. Absolutely wonderful. Mike?
One of the things that Christians at this time would face a trial is deny Jesus or be fed to the lions in the Colosseum.
Yeah.
So if you're rich, what do you do with that? If you're poor, it's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It would be a lot harder if you're rich. You might try to buy your way out of it. You might be like the rich young ruler who just said, no, I'm not giving up my riches.
Absolutely. Yeah, whenever you're really put at the edge of death, The poor person is like, well, I didn't have money to save me anyway. And the rich person may feel like he has a sense of control being ripped away from him. Now, that's the problem with having so much wealth, is you feel like you're in control when God is, that facade of money. And I think, again, this ties into wisdom to understand you don't get to take it with you. That understand that money may give you the illusion of power, or even the temporary true sense of power. But at the end of the day, it amounts to nothing. Paul said in 1 Timothy, don't say to the rich, don't set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. The love of money, well, let's be honest, the love of money isn't limited to the rich. I've known a lot of poor people who loved money, and the one thing they thought they needed was money. I'm like, no, just be joyous to know that you can depend on God a lot easier than some others. It takes wisdom to see through this facade of money, to realize that money doesn't give you any security, God does. And so wealth itself is a trial, and whether you have a lot of it or not enough, it's going to test your faith to depend on God. Like Jesus said, you can serve God or you can serve money. You cannot serve both. And so where do you find your security? Do you find your security in the numbers in your bank account, in your investments, in your insurance? Or do you find your security in God, who gives liberally and without reservation? And the verse 12 to 15, these are great verses. We're probably not going to have time to go through them too much. So verse 12, he kind of gives a conclusion to what he's been saying so far. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. That's a great verse. A nice reminder saying, listen, when all things are said and done, when you have stood through the test, God is going to reward you. And the word blessed, it calls back to the idea of being joyous, to have favor with God. Verses 13 to 15. These are really important verses. He says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So here we have a sense of behind the scenes of temptation. What is the process of temptation, right? And like I said, in the Greek, the idea of trial and tempt, it's the same Greek word, but in the noun form and the verb form. But here he's kind of shifting gears a little bit from the external trials of like persecution to the internal trials of being tempted. In these verses, he's trying to cooperate that we don't grow unless we cooperate with God. And we don't sin unless we cooperate with our desires, right? And so what would be a wrong response to a trial? What would be a wrong response to a temptation whenever you act on these desires? So he first hits on where does trials come from? Where do temptations come from? He's like, don't think it's from God. Oh no, right? And it's important to understand, does God test people? The answer is yes. God does test people. Genesis 22, when God said to Abraham, I want you to offer your son, he was testing him. Genesis 22 verse 1 says, God tested Abraham. And does God put people in positions where they're tempted? Yes. God, the Holy Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted. And so what is this verse actually saying? There's a difference here in what we're talking about. We're talking about what is God's motive in allowing these things to come to your life, right? So when trials happen in your life, whether God is placing trials in your life or whether he's allowing them to be placed in your life, either way, God is there over them whenever he could have saved you from these trials and kept you from it. So what is God's motive behind this? God does not want you to do evil. God does not want you to do wrong. God wants what is good, right? So when God tested Abraham, was he trying to get Abraham to fail? When God allowed Jesus to be tempted, did God want Jesus to fail? No. When God tests you, when God allows you to be tempted, does He want you to fail? The answer is no. God may put you in these positions. He may ask things of you that you feel are very difficult. He may allow trials to be placed upon you. Like with Job, he was active in the trial of Job. It didn't happen without his active permission. But when God does these things, we have to understand that God is good. God does not want you to sin. He does not have any evil desire within himself, right? It says, God does not tempt, in the sense that God does not want you to do evil. He is not enticing you to do evil. When you have a desire to do evil, don't say it's from God. When you have a desire and it is wrong, do not say it's from God. And God himself cannot be tempted. He's trying to hit at the idea that God is good and he has no evil desire within himself at all. And so if God does test you, if God does put you in a situation where you are tempted, it is not God trying to get you to fail. It is God trying to bring about your maturity, which James has been hitting on. That when trials do come in your life, it's an opportunity to grow, and that is God's desire. Kevin.
One of the things that we use so much often today is, God wants me to be happy, therefore I can do this.
God wants me to be happy, therefore I can do this. Listen, I don't know a verse where it says God wants you to be happy. I can point you to plenty of verses where it says God wants you to have joy. And we just talked about the difference between those two. Happy depends on your circumstance. Everything has to be going right for you to be happy. But you can have joy in any circumstance. Why? Because your joy is rooted in God. We will touch on these verses a little bit next week whenever we first go on. But I'll just end there. Okay. Hope you're having a good morning.